of ESPN for about 7 years and the president for 6 years. And the single most important thing I learned in those 13 years was that live sports is the most valuable content in media and will remain the most valuable content in media for 2 reasons. The first is just the passion that fans have for their team, their favorite players, for being at the game to watching the game. And second, sports is now the only content you have to watch live. And it's the only content that's unique. You can knock off everything else, a drama, a scripted series. You can do multiple takes on news and entertainment. But when Real Madrid and Barcelona play, maybe that's a bad example here in Portugal, they play and it's the only place you can watch it. If you happen to own that platform, you have a spectacular business. So that's why I felt the move from ESPN to DAZN is a good move, because I learned at ESPN the value of sports. I think it's clear that sports in the future is going to be over the top. It's a better platform. It's going to be delivered directly from an over-the-top platform to a consumer. You have the one-to-one relationship, so it's the future. So to me, it's fun to have worked at the greatest sports media company in the world and now be at the company that's going to disrupt that model globally going forward.
I was going to say, and now in a weird way, you're competing against your old company. Does that feel weird to you?
Look, ESPN's a spectacular company, and its continued success is assured. Mm-hmm. But there is some real fun at being at a new disruptive company that clearly is headed solely into the future of how sports is going to be delivered. It does allow you the flexibility and freedom to just do that, and do it quickly and nimbly and not have the complication, by the way, which everybody would love to have the complication of the success of ESPN and all of its platforms. I've done that. Now I like doing something different.
Does it take some getting used to sort of being in the position where you're more of the hunter as opposed to the hunted, as you were at ESPN? I don't think it actually takes much getting used to. I mean, the fundamentals of what we're doing in sports are the same. The only thing that's changing is the platform under which those are delivered. So the sports that matter are still the sports that matter. The producing of those sports is still the producing of those sports. The relationships you have with the leagues or the teams or with marketers is still the same. You just have to learn new technology. I don't intend to learn the technology. I intend to have other people who understand the technology. I didn't understand the technology of television. I don't really understand electricity. You know, I cut the lights on and they come on, and that's as much as I need to know. Well, you do understand, having been in the business as long as you have, how to make a big splash. And DAZN certainly made one by you guys signing Canelo Alvarez to a staggering $365 million. Why did signing Canelo make sense for DAZN?
Yeah, just a little context. I don't know. Boxing is at a moment in time where it is not quite the international sport it once was. The most important boxer in the world is Canelo Alvarez, who is a Mexican fighter who is the king of pay-per-view. He sold 3.6 million pay-per-views in his last 3 fights for a total ticket sales of $250 million. Pay-per-view fight in the United States is about $80 a pop. So if we're going to start a subscription streaming service in the United States, I wanted to find some content that would get us started. So if I can find those 3 million people who paid $80 for a fight, I believe that they will find the economics of a $10 a month streaming sports service to be attractive. So I've just got to find those people, tap into that pool of money, and get going. But we're a global company, so in every market we go into, there will be a different strategy. In Japan, we had a very simple strategy. The Japanese Football League and the Japanese Baseball League rights were available. In Italy, we bought 30% of Serie A. In Germany, we have Champions League. In the United States, where rights deals are long, deals in the United States are 5, 10, 15 years long, whereas in most of the world, rights deals are 3 years. So in the United States, one thing that was available was boxing. And while it seems like a lot of money, we're now in a business where the lifetime value of a subscription is what matters, the way it does for Netflix or Spotify or Pandora. So we're not paying Canelo $365 million, which, by the way, did make him the highest paid athlete in the world for his participating in his sport. I think Roger Federer may still be the highest paid athlete when you factor in marketing, but Canelo Alvarez is now the most highly paid athlete in the world, paid for what he does in his sport.
Now, how will we see Canelo differently with DAZN as opposed to how we've seen him positioned before in media?
This is really simple. Canelo Alvarez, who you used to watch by paying $80 to HBO or to your cable distributor, you'll now get a subscription to DAZN for $10. This is in the United States. Again, we have a sort of market-by-market strategy. You now will download an app, give us your credit card, and for that, you will be able to watch the fight for $70 cheaper than you watched it before. However, when you disrupt old platforms, there are points where people have to get used to new things. There are lots of people who are going to try to do it the way they did before. We launched in Italy in August, and the third week of the year we had the Juventus match with Ronaldo, and lots of people sat down in their living room and tried to cut on their television and watch it on Mediasat or Sky Italia, which is where it was last year. Getting to those people and communicating that, oh, you need to download an app. You then need to install a mechanism, a Roku, Chromecast, whereby you can use your smartphone as a control to put that match on television. We had a lot of people in Italy who did not like that. Now, that's not a problem with our technology. It's not a problem with our streaming capability. We didn't have any problem with that. But people, just as when you had to have somebody with a truck come into your house and put a satellite dish on your top of your house so you could get better reception, there is some pain in moving from one technology to what is ultimately a superior technology, but which is not what you're used to. So that is part of what we're dealing with. There's more transition for the people than there is for me.
Well, do you feel like you have somewhat of an advantage because you're coming from a platform that was very much still traditional, even though ESPN obviously has a streaming service and some other things, that gives you an advantage in terms of insight as to how to make your product more accessible?
Again, nobody in the sports business in the world would not trade with ESPN for their assets and rights and customer base. But we do have some advantages, right? We have the advantage of focus. This is the only thing we're focused on. So we buy rights, we put them on a streaming platform. We focus on customer experience and what we can do that's advantageous because we know what people are watching. When I was at ESPN, we don't know anything about you. If you're watching on cable television or broadcast television, it is so anachronistic that it still relies upon Nielsen ratings, which are done on a sampling technology so that it infers that X number of people watched. They don't really know how many people watched, and they don't have any idea who in the house is watching. They have no idea really. They know when the television set was cut on. They know when it was cut off. That's what they know. Right. And maybe somebody's watching, or maybe somebody's back in the backyard gardening while the TV set is on. We know when someone's engaged. We can then do things to make that experience better. And I think that's what we will do over the next few years.
You're very experienced at negotiating rights. You dealt with the NFL and the NBA for many, many years. How do you plan to leverage those relationships to get them to pick DAZN over, say, ESPN or cable or even other tech companies to pick you?
Ultimately, almost all of business is about relationships and who you know. So I have their telephone numbers, so they will.
That's a good start.
They will pick up their phone. They know me, and we have a long-term relationship where you build up trust and you build up some level of reliability and credibility. All of that will help. All of these leagues want to understand what the future is going to be, and they want to participate in that. And as we did with Canelo, there's relationships and there's decision making and there's a desire to participate in the future. But the most important thing is the writing of the check, which is leagues will give you their rights when you pull out your checkbook and you make a deal and you decide that you're going to pay them. And ultimately, that's what this is about. If this is superior technology, we have the ability to drive revenue by getting retention of subscribers, getting the money directly. We can do marketing within the service, not 30-second ads, which drive everybody crazy. So we will have to create a better business model so we can write a bigger check. That's all you need to know. If anybody in the audience has a bigger check than I do, they will sell you their games.
You brought up advertising, and you sort of hinted at it a little bit there. Your overall thoughts on advertising within a subscription service?
We do not have advertising in our subscription service right now, but we will. And what we will do is, just as we will disrupt the way that people acquire the ability to watch sports through an app, we are going to disrupt the way that advertising works. And though there we really will follow the Facebook, Google model, right? We will understand things about you that allow us to target ads. We will not run 30-second ads in pods of 5 or 6 of those that are repetitive, that drive people crazy, so they see the same car ad for 14 times in a 3-hour game. We will not interrupt games in ways that are unnatural, the way it happens on television. So I know this because we negotiated these. We had the rights to run 78 commercials during the average American football game. That is a lot of commercials to watch. What we will do, we'll figure out ways to integrate content into the production, into the game. Some cases it's very easy. In a boxing match, they fight for 3 minutes, then they take a minute and sit in the corner and somebody swabs Vaseline on them and tries to stop them from bleeding. During that, we will run a 30-second interview with one of the fighters that will be about some determination or about training or something that will be brought to you by some automobile that's reliable and delivers you a spectacular performance. So it will be brought to you by, and we will figure out ways to do things like that that feel natural, as opposed to interrupting. After an American football, you have a punt. They stop and show you 2.5 minutes of commercials before they come back and run another play. That we have the ability to disrupt that ultimately. One of the biggest problems, this is more acute in sports other than football, where there are artificial breaks created solely for the benefit of running ads. Yeah. That's why they stop in basketball game over and over and over. You don't need to stop. I played basketball, and you could play for 20 minutes in a row without all those breaks, but you need those breaks to pay for the rights fees.
Yeah, the ever so dangerous media timeout, which you hear over and over again. So with that being said, in the model that you guys have worked hard to construct, what does the future of sports consumption look like to you?
Look, over time, sports consumption is going to be that you buy a service, you download that app, you use your smartphone to watch it on a big screen. There is a misconception that we're moving into an era where people are going to watch sports on their phone. They will. If you happen to be somewhere, the beauty of mobile technology is you watch the game and it actually looks pretty incredible. There's probably somebody here right now watching a game. I won't embarrass anybody, but that's a wonderful experience. But ultimately the experience is going to be, you're still going to have a big screen. And forget, it's not a television, it's a screen. You got screens in your house, you got screens in your briefcase that you pull out that are this big. You've got a screen in your pocket that's this big. And all we're doing is creating a service whereby whatever screen is most available and or advantageous, you're going to be able to watch that game on that screen. You're not going to watch it as a 2-hour window on a linear product. You're going to watch it when it comes on, on whatever screen you're on. I mean, that's the future of sports consumption. It's the future of all video consumption, pretty much.
Part of me is a little scared because as somebody who's a sports commentator, you talked a lot about live rights, but not about necessarily sports commentary shows. So I'm a little fearful. Hopefully that isn't, they still want people like me to sit and talk about it.
I'm confident you'll be okay. But it does mean that the game is paramount, right? When you have a 24/7 linear network, that's 8,760 hours a year. And you need to fill that time. And if you have a linear stream and you have a service in a certain time zone and there's no games on in that time zone, you fill it with talk and reruns and re-airs. And yes, that will be disrupted. At ESPN, we produced 90,000 hours of live content, and about 15 to 20,000 of those hours were talk. There were people sitting around talking about sports. That is still interesting to people, and people want it. But there is very little doubt that there will be less of that, and there will be more live consumption.
Thanks for making me feel better.
You'll be fine, ma'am.
Well, as everyone knows, you built a certain legacy at ESPN, and now that you're with DAZN, what would you like to accomplish maybe in the next 5 years there?
Look, we have a very clear mission. DAZN is the first mover. We are the first company in the world that is going into places and creating large sports media service. In Japan, we are arguably the most important sports media service right now. We clearly have more content and more viewership than any other service. In Italy, we emerged very quickly as the second most important media service during the Serie A season. In Germany, we're the third largest. I want to move quickly, launch in multiple countries around the world. We're in Europe, Asia, and North America. That leaves a bunch of continents. Not a bunch. It leaves a few continents. We're not interested in Antarctica. So you can probably guess pretty quickly that we'll be looking in Latin America and Asia and Africa to quickly launch new services, and we'll do that next year. And where I want DAZN to be is to get out in front and become the service that's leading the way and is in more places than anybody else. And I do believe we have a moment in time where we're ahead of everybody else. And my intention, just if I was running a 1,500-meter race, is to get a little further ahead than the guys. We're out of the blocks first, and before these other guys get started, we'd like to get further ahead.
Well, as somebody who's worked with me for a number of years, you know I'm really good at blowing through stop signs, so I see this red light going off, as many producer at ESPN could attest. So I think that our time is actually up, short but sweet.
It was lovely to see you, and nice to be with you.
Good to see you again, too.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us.